Bernard Madoff was once considered a Wall Street legend. He was the founder of a highly successful investment firm, a pioneer of electronic trading, and even served as the chairman of NASDAQ. Investors trusted him with their money, believing they had found a financial genius who could deliver steady, risk-free profits. But behind the illusion of success was one of the greatest financial frauds in history. For decades, Madoff ran a secret scheme that destroyed the lives of thousands. His deception went undetected for years, fooling banks, billionaires, and even financial regulators. How did Madoff build such an empire of lies? Why did no one stop him? And what finally led to his downfall? In this video, we will uncover the rise and fall of Bernard Madoff, his fraudulent empire, and the devastating consequences of his actions. His story is a chilling lesson on greed, deception, and the dangers of unchecked power. 1. The early life of Bernard Madoff. Bernard Laurent Madoff was born in 1938 in Queens, New York. He grew up in a working-class family, but he always had big ambitions. From a young age, he was fascinated by money and dreamed of making it big in the financial world. After high school, Madoff enrolled at the University of Alabama before transferring to Hofstra University, where he earned a degree in political science. Unlike many Wall Street elites, he did not come from extreme wealth or Ivy League connections, but he was determined to succeed. In 1960, with only $5,000 saved from summer jobs, he started his own firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. He built his reputation as a hardworking and innovative trader, using cutting-edge technology to stay ahead of the competition. By the 1980s, Madoff had become one of the most respected figures in finance. Madoff's firm was seen as a leader in the industry. It handled billions of dollars in trades and was trusted by some of the most powerful investors in the world. But beneath the surface, a dark secret was growing. 2. Making of a financial empire. Madoff's success was built on more than just his trading firm. He created an exclusive investment fund that promised clients steady and consistent returns, regardless of market conditions. Unlike other funds that experienced ups and downs, Madoff's fund seemed almost magical. It always made money. This attracted some of the world's wealthiest investors, including celebrities, banks, hedge funds, and even charities. Many investors had to beg for a chance to put their money into Madoff's fund. He made it seem like an exclusive club, and that exclusivity made people trust him even more. Because of his status, no one questioned how he was able to generate such high and consistent profits. Even financial experts who found his numbers suspicious were ignored. After all, Madoff was a respected figure. Why would he lie? For years, the money kept flowing in. Investors believed they were part of something special, and Madoff's reputation continued to grow. But no one realized that behind the success was a house of cards waiting to collapse. 3. How Madoff kept the illusion alive. Madoff was a master of deception. He controlled every aspect of his financial records, making sure no one could see what was really happening. Unlike other financial firms that used independent auditors, Madoff used a small, unknown accounting firm that answered only to him. He also refused to share details about his strategy, claiming it was too complex for outsiders to understand. Investors accepted this because they believed in his reputation. After all, they were making money, so why ask questions? Madoff's ability to maintain trust was key to his success. He never promised outrageous profits, just steady, believable growth. This made his operation seem even more legitimate. Anyone who questioned him was dismissed as jealous or misinformed. Even financial regulators failed to catch him, despite multiple warnings from experts. He had built an empire of lies, and no one seemed capable of bringing it down. 4. The collapse of Madoff's empire. For years, Madoff's business continued to grow, but everything changed in 2008. The global financial crisis hit, and investors began withdrawing their money. Normally, this would not be a problem for a real investment firm, but Madoff had no actual funds. He was just moving money around. As more investors requested withdrawals, Madoff ran out of cash. He needed new deposits to keep up, but the financial crisis had dried up fresh investments. His empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In December 2008, Madoff finally admitted the truth to his sons. He confessed that his entire investment business was a lie. His sons, shocked and devastated, turned him in to the authorities. Within days, the FBI arrested him at his luxury Manhattan apartment. The man who had once been seen as a financial genius was now exposed as a fraud. The world was in shock. 5. The devastating impact. Madoff's scheme was one of the most destructive financial frauds in history. Over $65 billion had vanished. Thousands of people, from retirees to charities, had lost everything. The fallout was enormous. Investors who had trusted Madoff for decades were left bankrupt. Some even took their own lives, unable to cope with the loss. Charities that had relied on his investments were forced to shut down. Financial institutions were also heavily affected. Some banks had poured billions into Madoff's fund, and when the truth came out, they faced massive losses. The scandal shook Wall Street, leading to widespread distrust in the financial system. Madoff's family also suffered. His wife, Ruth Madoff, was publicly shamed and lost almost everything. His son Mark Madoff died by suicide in 2010, unable to live with the shame of his father's actions. His other son, Andrew, also passed away from cancer in 2014. Madoff himself was sentenced to 150 years in prison, the maximum possible sentence. He spent the rest of his life behind bars, dying in 2021 at the age of 82. His name became a symbol of financial greed and corruption. 6. Why no one stopped Madoff sooner? One of the most shocking aspects of Madoff's fraud was how long it lasted. For nearly 4 decades, his scheme went undetected, even though there were warning signs. Several financial analysts raised concerns, but regulators failed to take action. One of the earliest warnings came from Harry Markopolos, a financial investigator who suspected Madoff was running a fraud as early as 1999. Markopolos spent years trying to expose Madoff, submitting multiple reports to the SEC. He showed clear mathematical proof that Madoff's returns were impossible. But the SEC ignored these warnings. Investigators reviewed Madoff's firm several times, but never uncovered the fraud. Some say this was due to incompetence, while others believe Madoff's reputation made regulators hesitant to challenge him. Even investors who noticed inconsistencies often ignored them. Many were making money and did not want to question how. Banks and hedge funds that invested in Madoff's fund also failed to conduct proper due diligence. Greed blinded them to the truth. By the time authorities finally acted, the damage had already been done. Billions of dollars had been lost, and thousands of lives had been ruined. 7. How Madoff fooled even the smartest investors. Madoff's scam was not just about numbers, it was about psychology. He understood human behavior and used it to his advantage. He created an air of exclusivity, making people believe they were part of a secret elite investment club. Instead of aggressively marketing his fund, he made investors come to him. He even rejected some, making it seem like only the lucky few could invest with him. This strategy made people even more desperate to hand over their money. Madoff also played on trust. He had personal relationships with many of his investors, including family friends, celebrities, and business leaders. They believed in him because he had always delivered results. Even financial professionals were fooled. Banks, hedge funds, and financial firms invested with Madoff without questioning how he consistently achieved such stable returns. They assumed he had a unique strategy that they simply did not understand. By exploiting trust, greed, and the desire for exclusivity, Madoff built an illusion so strong that even experts failed to see the truth. 8. The aftermath and legal battles. After Madoff's arrest, the legal battles began. His victims fought to recover their lost money, and investigators worked to track down any remaining assets. The court appointed Irving Picard as the trustee in charge of recovering stolen funds. He spent years tracking down hidden money, suing banks, and redistributing funds to victims. Over time, more than $14 billion was recovered, helping to partially compensate those who had lost everything. Many lawsuits were also filed against financial institutions that had invested with Madoff. Some banks were accused of ignoring red flags and failing to conduct proper checks. Legal battles lasted for years, with billions in settlements paid out. Madoff's family also faced lawsuits. His wife, Ruth Madoff, lost most of her fortune and lived under strict financial restrictions. His sons, despite claiming they knew nothing about the fraud, faced public backlash and legal scrutiny. The scandal led to major changes in financial regulation, including stricter oversight of investment firms and increased protections for investors. But for many victims, the damage was permanent. 9. How Madoff's scheme changed the financial world. The Madoff scandal sent shockwaves through the financial world. It exposed serious flaws in the system, forcing regulators to take fraud prevention more seriously. One of the biggest lessons was the importance of transparency. Madoff operated in secrecy, refusing to let outsiders see his trading records. This made it easier for him to hide his fraud. Today, financial firms face stricter reporting requirements to prevent similar scams. The scandal also highlighted the dangers of blind trust. Many investors relied on Madoff's reputation rather than doing their own research. After the fraud was exposed, financial institutions began enforcing stricter due diligence processes. Additionally, the case led to improvements in the SEC. The agency faced severe criticism for failing to catch Madoff despite multiple warnings. As a result, reforms were introduced to improve financial oversight and prevent future failures. Madoff's crimes changed the way people view investments. His scheme reminded the world that even the most respected figures can be frauds, and that no investment is truly risk-free. 10. Madoff's final years and death. After his conviction, Madoff spent the rest of his life in prison. He was sentenced to 150 years, ensuring he would never be free again. In prison, he reportedly expressed regret for his actions, though many believed he was only sorry for getting caught. He gave occasional interviews, but his words did little to repair the damage he had caused. Over the years, his health declined. In 2020, he requested early release due to kidney disease, but the request was denied. The court ruled that his crimes were too severe to allow for any leniency. On April 14, 2021, Bernard Madoff died in prison at the age of 82. His death marked the end of one of the biggest financial frauds in history, but his legacy of deception and destruction remains. 11. The psychological manipulation behind Madoff's success. Madoff's ability to deceive was not just about numbers, it was about psychological manipulation. He understood human behavior and knew how to exploit emotions like greed, trust, and fear of missing out. One of his most powerful tactics was exclusivity. He made it seem like investing with him was a rare privilege, rejecting some investors to make his fund appear even more desirable. This made people desperate to be part of his inner circle. He also relied heavily on social proof. Many of his investors were wealthy, influential individuals, including celebrities, business leaders, and even charities. Seeing others invest gave people confidence that Madoff's fund was legitimate. Another key strategy was consistency. Unlike other risky investments, Madoff's returns were stable and predictable. This gave investors a false sense of security, making them believe his strategy was safe. By controlling the narrative and creating an illusion of success, Madoff kept his victims blind to reality. Even as doubts emerged, people reassured themselves with the belief that Madoff could not possibly be lying to everyone. 12. The impact on Madoff's victims. The collapse of Madoff's scheme devastated thousands of people. Many lost their life savings, retirement funds, and businesses. Some victims were wealthy, but many were ordinary people who had entrusted Madoff with everything. One of the hardest hit groups was charitable organizations. Several foundations that had invested heavily with Madoff were forced to shut down after losing all their funds. The fraud did not just destroy individual investors, it wiped out entire communities. Some victims took legal action, trying to recover what they had lost. But for many, the emotional toll was even worse than the financial loss. Some suffered severe depression, and a few even took their own lives after losing everything. Madoff's own family suffered as well. His son Mark Madoff died by suicide in 2010, unable to cope with the shame and public scrutiny. His other son, Andrew, battled cancer and died in 2014. Madoff's wife, Ruth, lost her fortune and lived in isolation. The human cost of Madoff's crimes went far beyond money. His actions destroyed lives, families, and trust in the financial system. 13. The role of financial institutions in Madoff's fraud. While Madoff was the mastermind, he did not act alone. Many financial institutions and banks played a role, whether intentionally or through negligence. Several major banks, including JP Chase, processed transactions for Madoff's firm for years. Some banks even suspected something was wrong, but failed to take action. In 2014, JP paid a $2.6 billion settlement for failing to report suspicious activity. Hedge funds and investment firms also funneled money into Madoff's fund without doing proper due diligence. They were blinded by the promise of high returns and ignored red flags. Some institutions actively promoted Madoff's scheme, bringing in more investors and deepening the fraud. These firms later faced lawsuits from victims who accused them of enabling the scam. The Madoff case exposed serious flaws in the financial industry, showing how easily greed and complacency can lead to disaster. 14. How Madoff's fraud could have been prevented. The warning signs of Madoff's fraud were there for years, yet no one stopped him. So what could have been done differently? First, financial regulators like the SEC should have acted sooner. They received multiple complaints and warnings about Madoff's scheme, but failed to investigate properly. Stronger oversight could have stopped him much earlier. Second, investors needed to be more skeptical. Many trusted Madoff blindly because of his reputation. Conducting independent research and asking tough questions could have exposed the fraud sooner. Third, banks and financial firms should have done more to flag suspicious transactions. Madoff's returns were too consistent to be real, yet institutions failed to raise alarms. The biggest lesson is that no investment should be trusted without verification. Transparency, accountability, and skepticism are the best defenses against financial fraud. 15. What we can learn from Madoff's story. The Madoff scandal is a powerful reminder of the risks in the financial world. Even the most trusted figures can be frauds, and blind trust can lead to disaster. One of the key lessons is that extraordinary returns often come with extraordinary risks. If an investment seems too good to be true, it probably is. Another lesson is the importance of diversification. Many victims put all their money into Madoff's fund, believing it was safe. A more balanced investment strategy could have protected them from total loss. The case also highlights the importance of strong financial oversight. Governments and regulators must remain vigilant to prevent similar scams in the future. Most importantly, Madoff's story teaches us to question everything. Financial success should be built on transparency and honesty, not secrecy and deception. Conclusion: a lesson in greed and deception. Bernard Madoff's story is a powerful reminder of the dangers of blind trust in the financial world. His fraud lasted for decades because people believed in his reputation, ignoring warning signs along the way. He built a facade of success that fooled some of the most intelligent and experienced investors in the world. His Ponzi scheme thrived because of trust, prestige, and a carefully crafted illusion of stability. The financial world saw him as a genius, not knowing he was orchestrating one of the biggest frauds in history. He created an illusion of stability and success, fooling investors, banks, and regulators alike. His deception was so well crafted that even experienced financial professionals failed to see the truth. He promised steady and consistent returns, something unheard of in real investing. Investors were eager to hand over their money, believing Madoff had discovered a secret formula for endless profits. In reality, their money was never invested. It was simply used to pay off earlier investors. The entire system was built on lies, and yet it continued for decades. His scheme exposed serious flaws in financial regulation and showed how even the most respected figures can deceive the world. The failure of oversight agencies like the SEC revealed the weaknesses in the system meant to protect investors. Madoff had been investigated multiple times, but his reputation kept him safe. He used his influence to silence doubts, ensuring his fraud remained undetected. The financial system relied too much on trust, and Madoff exploited that trust to an extreme degree. The collapse of his empire was not just a personal downfall, it was a wake-up call for the entire industry. Madoff's fraud did not just affect the wealthy, it wiped out charities, pension funds, and life savings of ordinary people. The devastation he caused was beyond financial loss. It shattered trust and destroyed lives. Some victims lost everything, unable to recover from the betrayal. For many, retirement plans disappeared overnight, leaving them with no financial security. Nonprofit organizations, which depended on steady investments, were forced to shut down. The consequences of Madoff's actions rippled across society, leaving behind a trail of ruined lives and shattered dreams. His story serves as a warning. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. No investment is risk-free, and blind faith in a single individual or company can lead to disaster. The Madoff scandal reminds us to question everything, demand transparency, and never assume that wealth comes without risk. Greed and deception will always exist, but with awareness and vigilance, we can protect ourselves from falling victim to the next great financial fraud. Those who forget the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat them, and Madoff's story is a lesson the world cannot afford to forget.